Hey everybody, and welcome to today's video. In today's video, I'm going to try and make it short and very on to the point, as this is a very simple thing which for some reason can cause some issues for people that haven't used it yet. Namely, we're going to take a look at how to use different textures on either walls or floors made with the floor generator script. Now, first of all, I've actually made a video about floor generator. If you haven't watched it, make sure you check it out. But all you got to do to get it is go over to cgsource.com, and here you can download it, as well as you can get it. You can get the multi-texture map plugin, which kind of goes in hand with the plugin, and it can give you some really nice randomizing results. Like I said, I've already covered this, so I will not be going deeper around that. But for this version of the video, I'm actually going to use the floor generator version 2.0. And the main difference is that this is actually now this plugin is not like it used to be, but now you can use it as a modifier. And if you go ahead and buy the full version, you're gonna have all of these different, or 5 of these different patterns. So I'm going to jump back into Max, and I'm going to show you for a second what I have for a map here, or for a scene. As you can see, it's a very, very simple box with HDRI light, as V-Ray sun, and 2 lights here to act as light portals. So other than this, this is a very, very simple scene. If I take a look at how the scene looks, I'm going to render it really quickly. And as you can see, a very clean scene. Now the thing is, if I zoom in a bit, you're going to see that I have quite a bit of noise, but since this is just so I can show the texture, I really don't care about the noise. That's why I've optimized it for speed. All right, so now the first thing that I want to do is I'm going to select my floor. And now, as we said, in this, or the second, or the 2.0 version of the floor generator, the way to add it is to go in the modifier list and scroll down to F and find floor generator. By default, this thing will keep the settings that you've used in the previous time. In my case, it made the maximum length of, well, let me just isolate this like this so it's easier for you to see. The maximum length of all of these boards is 100 centimeters. The width is about 10 centimeters. So if I want to have longer boards, I can go and put it down to 200. This will give us 2-meter long boards, and let's go and put in 20. So this is going to give me bigger boards. I'm going to unhide this. And now, again, quickly, I'm going to re-render this thing so we can see it in action. And as you can see on the render, we already have the basis for our floor. Now, let's go ahead and add some textures to it. In the way that I'm going to do, first of all, I'm going to press Shift-L to hide the lights. So I'm going to press M to open up the material editor. And what I'm going to do here is, first of all, I'm going to go and find a texture that I want to use for wood. I've actually gone ahead and found a few textures that are just wood, nothing too complicated. As you can see, it's a very simple texture. It's not even tileable, so we don't have a texture that's tiling on itself, except this one. But since it has a repetitive line, it really won't be that visible. So I'm gonna use the first one. So basically, I'm going to use this texture for it. So I've applied it over here on this material. So I'm just gonna click and drag this on the floor. Now, here's what happens. The first issue that happens when you add a material onto a floor generator is that the floor generator will treat all of these planks as an individual object. So all of them will receive the same texture, which kind of looks right for an individual plank. But when you take a look at the whole thing, it kind of has this repeating effect, which is kind of breaking the immersion and reality of your scenes. So we need to find a way to fix this. Now, the logical way would be to go ahead and apply a UVW map. But as soon as we apply the UVW map, what we're going to see is that, first of all, it's too big. So we're going to have to get it to tile. But let me just go ahead and render out one version like this. And as we can see, the floor now has a texture, but the main issue is that this is one continuous texture, and the floor has been divided into a number of different planks. And the problem with realism is that if you have different planks, it's kind of impossible to have it all as just one continuous texture without even any sort of breakup in the actual look of the texture. So we need to find a way in which we are going to take this texture and break it apart. Now, first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to apply a UVW mapping clear. So this is going to delete any UV unwrap we have here, or UV mapping. And now on top of this, I'm going to add an unwrap UVW map. What this is going to do is going to make all of these elements show up their scenes. So what I want to do here is open the UV editor. And in here, I can see that I have all of my mapping. So what I'm going to do is, with my polygon selected, I'm going to go ahead and select all of the possible polygons here. And now I'm going to go down to mapping and go flatten mapping. Once I click here, I'm going to get this window. Now over here, I can specify at which angle all of these planks are going to stick to each other. So at an angle of 45, I want it to separate. So anything under that angle will still stay as one piece. Anything above it will be split separately. So I'm not going to change anything here. I'm going to leave everything as it is and just click OK. As soon as we click OK, it will take a few seconds and it will give me something like this. So what it did is basically it took the whole thing and it made it so it's flattened. It's mapped with the flattened mapping or planar mapping. Now what that does in our scene is actually, if I take a look at my screen now, I can notice that I still have the texture, but now it's all broken up and it's no longer following that same texture or the one texture. Now the problem here is that probably the tiling of this texture is still too big. So what I can do here is simply open up the UV editor, select all of my pieces here, and go ahead and scale them outwards. So I'm gonna try to get one of these, scale it outwards until I get to a point where I actually like how big my texture looks like. Or I can even go bigger. There we go. There you go. And now, as you can see, the texture is very fine. Everything looks good. But if I take a look at the actual UV, you're going to notice a bit of an issue. And that is that if you watched me do any of my other modeling tutorials and I've done any unwrapping, I've always mentioned to say that you want to keep your unwrapping within the 0 to 1 UV space. Otherwise, this thing is simply going to start to repeat itself. And especially you're going to find that on these pieces where it's simply going from one texture to the other. So let's try and find that one. So I'm going to zoom in here. And that's actually on the side, so it's not a big problem. Let's see if we can find that one. There we go. So this one, still no problem. But if you don't want to go at it this way, so I can Control Z a few times back, and now instead of scaling it upwards, what I can do is simply go in and inside the texture, and increase the tiling to, let's say, 5 by 5. And again, we get the same or similar result as we did previously. So in this case, we really don't have an issue, but just so I can actually see what's happening, I'm going to render out one version. So let's render. So now if we take a look at the scene, it's a very different scene. Even though we're using the same exact texture, now we're starting to get some variation in the color, where some of them are lighter, some of them are darker. Now, one thing that you want to remember is that when you're using a texture for this, if you're using a texture that's seamless and the colors have been normalized, you're not going to have this transition where you have some of these to be darker. In this case, I have it because simply the texture has some pieces that are darker, some that are lighter. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to change the floor. So instead of having a normal type of floor where the planks are simply all going in one direction, what we're going to do here is we're going to simply take the floor generator. Well, for this, I'm going to first of all, I'm going to have to remove the unwrap and the UVW map. So down in the floor generator, I'm going to change the floor pattern. Instead of using a standard, which is what you would get with the free version, if I use something more complex, like maybe a herringbone or a chevron, for example, as soon as I click on herringbone, you're going to see that now my texture is, or my floor is different, where I have planks that are going at an angle of 45 degrees to each other. And the problem with this is that now that if I use that same texture, I'm going to have a problem, because if I make it so the seams or the texture is flowing straight down, it's going to intersect with both of these. If, for example, if I take the UVW map and simply rotate it at 45 degrees, like so, now it's okay with these guys, but really not okay with these. If I go the other way around, again, the same problem. So now what we need to do is more or less do what we just did previously. So first of all, I'm going to clear up the unwrap. So UVW mapping clear. And on top of this, put an unwrap UVW. Again, do the same exact thing where you're going to go select all of these, hit mapping and flatten mapping. Okay. All right, so now if I take a look at my map, you're going to notice that all of these are flowing as they should. So with that, we get all of this to look nice. And if I remove or reduce the tiling, I'm going to get a different look. 5. Let's try 6. There we go. So basically now it's all about playing around with the tiling until you get it to a point in which the seams or the texture looks nice. Now what I'm trying to do is add in just a simple, oh, there we go. This is what I was looking for. On these tiles here, or these planks, we have an issue. And that issue is basically, if I take a look at my UV space here, let's just open up the UV editor. At this point, since I'm using the texture, so, well, let's go with this. As I'm using this texture in the background, as you can see it now, it's tiled twice. In order to get rid of this piece over here, is simply move this texture to the side a bit. Now, don't worry if it overlaps with another texture or with another UV space, because simply we're not going to do anything else with this, but just move these to the side until we get it at a point in which it's no longer cutting in half of it. Like, see this one? There we go. Simply move it front or back until you get rid of that seam in the middle of your planks. Now, in this case, it's really not that visible, but if you have a scene in which you have to be really meticulous about the way that you put in details, then you're going to have to be careful about stuff like that. And another thing is that can be a bit time consuming, but all in all, it can give you really nice and quick results. So again, let's simply re-render this one more time. And as you can see, now the texture is looking nice, no more issues, and all of these are flowing in the correct way. All right, so I'm going to do one more thing, and I'm going to select this. Again, I'm going to delete the two top. Flow generator, and I'm going to change it one more time from either to a chevron, which is going to give us a different view. Let's go. Something like this. Or I can even go to something more complex in which you have something like this, either that or the hexagon. The hexagon can go pretty much any way you want it. So for this, I'm going to try the basket weave. There we go, like this. All right, so in order to make it even easier to see how this thing is going to react, I'm going to change the texture. So instead of the initial texture, I'm going to use this one. This should have more pieces that are repeatable, and it's going to be good for me to show you how you can get rid of those issues as well. So I'm going to get this tiling back to 1, change the texture. There we go. So as you can see, really nice big texture. And again, unwrapping this thing. So go UV editor, select everything, mapping, flatten mapping, okay. All right, so with this, there we go. Now, as I can see, all of these are the right way, but at the moment they are simply too big. So let's increase the tiling again. Let's go 5 by 5, and this is what I was talking about. When you have a texture in which you have a fairly visible seam here, this can be a problem. And the way to do it is, like I told you, simply select the polygon that you want to fix this issue. As you can see here with the UV editor, simply I'm going to move this over here, and there we go. That's fixed. Like I said, don't worry if it overlaps with some of the other. There we go. And manually fix those issues. There we go. Nothing too complex. It simply takes a bit of work to get it right, but as soon as you're done, you should be left with a scene in which you're not going to have any two pieces of wood next to each other to overlap or look like they're a piece of the same texture. So let's render it one more time and see how this thing looks. And there we go. Now the entire scene or the entire floor is textured. There is no issues whatsoever. Well, there are issues at the moment, but if I spend just a tiny bit more time cleaning up these overlaps, in that case, I can get a decent and clean scene on which I can continue modeling or doing whatever else I want to the scene. So with this, we pretty much close this issue on how to change textures on Floor Generator meshes that are made with a Floor Generator script. And I hope you guys had fun and you managed to learn something new. If you do have any questions, leave them below in the comments and I will meet you there. If you enjoyed this video, then please click the like button, and if you're not subscribed, now is a great time to do so. As always, thank you very much for watching, and I will see you all in the next video. Bye bye.